Hello, class, and welcome to week 5 of Abnormal Psychology. I can't believe we're already in week 5. This class has flown by. This lecture video will serve the purpose as to, of course, reviewing your week 5 materials and going over your week 5 assignment. So let's jump right in. And I hope you all are doing well for this week. I know last week was kind of a refresher and just we're able to relax. So this week we have quite a bit more activities to complete. So of course you'll have to read chapters 9 and 10 of Abnormal Psychology, and these chapters will focus on schizophrenia and psychotic disorders, as well as sexual and gender disorders. There's definitely some interesting information about both of these within both of these chapters. So I'm interested to see what your thoughts and feelings are in terms of that, in terms of whenever you discuss it in your discussion board. So yes, so the assignment that we have for this week is your essay number 3, and this lecture will of course focus mainly on your essay. I don't want to spend too much time on the material because the essay is the main portion of this week's assignments. So for this essay, it's similar to the essays that we've done previously. So if you follow that same format, you'll be perfectly fine. And just remember the critiques that I gave you for the previous assignments. If you just change those around a little bit and complete them how the assignment is asking for, and you should be perfectly fine. And I believe all of you guys did really well on your last essay, so I have 100% full confidence in that you guys will do well on these as well. So for this essay, it's definitely an interesting topic. I think schizophrenia is by far one of the most interesting disorders, in my personal opinion, just because of the development of it and contributing factors and how it develops and when it develops and things like that, and then of course the symptomology. So of course this essay will be 3 pages, and remember to meet that 3-page minimum, not 2.5, not 2 3/4, 3 full pages of writing. So just so you don't get docked points for that. So it'll be 3 pages in which you will explore, of course, influential factors of schizophrenia, and that's included in biological or genetic research stating specifically whether schizophrenic mothers deliver schizophrenic babies, things like that. Environmental research, to where it does research in terms of someone's environment can allow them to develop schizophrenia. So stress factors, changes in your life, things like that, are all commonly known to essentially help in the development of schizophrenia. So those are things that you should be talking about. And you will also, of course, will include a reflection section on your faith perspective. And remember to, especially for this section, I know some of you may not be Christians, so if you are using or talking about some type of faith perspective, please remember to include, maybe if not a Bible source for this section, or maybe just some type of specific source just to enhance that area. So for the specifics, you'll of course have an introductory paragraph where you'll discuss, your topic and what will be outlined in the paper. Then followed by your literature review, and you'll split this up between your biological and genetic section. And you'll need at least 2 peer-reviewed sources, no websites, that will discuss genetic factors that have been identified in the development or maintenance of schizophrenia. You'll summarize these studies, clearly stating the biological factors and how they influence schizophrenia, which has included the onset of psychotic symptoms, the maintenance of the disorder, things like that, and also provide your own personal thoughts and feelings and opinions, specifically in relation to what the research says. And then, of course, you'll have another section, the literature review, that will discuss non-genetic environmental contributors. So you'll also need 2 peer-reviewed sources, no websites, that will discuss what environmental factors have been identified in the development or maintenance of schizophrenia. of course, was same as the previous section. You'll summarize the studies, clearly stating the environmental or non-genetic factors and how they influence schizophrenia, and that can include the severity of symptoms, the onset of symptoms, the development of the symptoms, where that originated from, whether it's a stressful situation where an 18-year-old kid's going off to college and that exacerbated their symptoms. You'll hear a lot about that, specifically considering the onset of schizophrenia is within that prime 17 to 22 age range. So a child going off to college and there's a lot of stress and things like that involved in their life that could exacerbate their symptoms and their development of schizophrenia. So you hear a lot of stories about how a student goes off to college and they're just not the same after that. Once they leave, they're hearing voices, they disappear off campus, things like that. So those are some interesting components in terms of this disorder. And then lastly, you'll talk about treatment for this section. So you'll use at least one peer-reviewed source study for this, so that it's a little bit different from your other papers. So you'll need an additional source for your treatment. And it, of course, discuss at least one effective method to treat schizophrenia, whether that's medication, whether that's therapy, whether that's a holistic approach. Whatever research you discover that is proven to be helpful for helping schizophrenia, include that in your treatment section. And of course, be sure to summarize what the study overall aims to reach at, explaining the treatment, how it's helpful. Does it reduce the symptoms? Does it improve overall function? Does it reduce hallucinations? Does it, improve overall, functioning in general? So that will be helpful in that treatment section. And then lastly, of course, your faith integration section, to where you'll, of course, discuss, given what you learned throughout the research and things that you read and the text and other influential factors, has your understanding and thought process and opinions of schizophrenia changed? If so, why not? Things like that. Of course, discuss, how you would make the distinction between whether someone is reportedly talking to God or are they hearing voices. When might you be concerned about their maybe grasp in reality, things like that. So that specific faith integration section is interesting, and also include maybe some biblical sources or biblical evidence of maybe where schizophrenia may have been prevalent in the Bible and things like that. And I think that it's important in this section as well, because, distinguishing whether the person is having a psychotic episode or if they're having a religious experience. Because sometimes I think specifically some people may confuse the two. They sometimes may look very similar. So it's important to have that distinction and to explore that within this paper. So of course, like I mentioned before, the paper must be 3 to 4 pages, APA formatted, no abstracts. You'll need a title page and a reference page. And remember to always cite your references throughout the body of the paper. I'm looking for that. Of course, you'll need a minimum of 5 peer-reviewed sources, 2 for the genetic section, 2 for the environmental section, and 1 for your treatment section. And those are outside of your textbook. So if you want to use your textbook, that will be your 6th source. So just be mindful of that as well. And remember to continue using your subheaders and your things like that to ultimately shape your paper and make it very well succinctly written and things like that. So I hope that helps in terms of what I'm looking for your paper. But I do want to touch on maybe a couple things within the schizophrenia realm, because that is the focus of your paper. So I will pop open the week 10 PowerPoint. So like I mentioned before, schizophrenia and psychotic disorders. So let's jump to the main topic of discussion. And of course, there's always some crash course videos for you guys um, to reference. If this specific link doesn't open, if you go to YouTube and just type crash course schizophrenia, it will pop up something for you on YouTube. So let's see. So with schizophrenia, there's a couple things to look out for. Of course, hallucinations and things like that, but there's also disturbances in language and thought. So, in terms of specific symptoms within language and their thought process, they may be producing word salad, which is they're talking and they're saying a whole bunch of words, but they're out of order. So their language is mixed up. That's one that I've seen before. The others, there's clanging, neologism, allogia, and echolalia. Excuse me. Of course, I always have to mispronounce something in a PowerPoint slide. But there's these other specific ones. If you want to read a little bit more about those, you can do that within the text, because I don't want to dive deep too much into those. But of course, they'll have delusions. They'll have bizarre, different. There's definitely a large range of what type of delusion someone can experience when they're having a schizophrenic or psychotic episode. So there's bizarre delusions, there's delusional jealousy, erotomaniac delusions, grandiose delusions, mood congruent delusions, and mood incongruent delusions. So grandiose, of course, is similar to kind of like histrionic, when we talked about that last week, how there's just this huge idea of something. And if you've ever seen the movie A Beautiful Mind, he was having those grandiose delusions where he thought he was, saving the world and things like that. So just in terms of those delusions, there's definitely multiple levels, and of course you'll read more about that in your chapter. So moving forward, so one of the main things, one symptom that can be present, of course, is there's disturbances in motor behavior. So when you think of schizophrenia, oftentimes people think about delusions and hallucinations, but there's so many other symptoms and characteristics that happen. Like we mentioned before, the language, and then there's, of course, delusions, hallucinations, but there's also disturbances in motor behavior. And the one that stands out to me is catatonia. And sometimes a patient may be in a catatonic state, to where they just sit there, or they just lie there and they just can't move, and they're in that space. So that's definitely an interesting component, and I think more research should be done in terms of why that happens, and what how that relates to the nervous system and things like that in terms of this disorder. Social withdrawal, of course. Let me see if there's anything else I want to talk to you guys about. Oh, there's one thing too. So with a lot of it, we talked about a lot of disorders and different things, but specifically for the DSM diagnoses, these symptoms have to be prevalent for a long period of time. Specifically, when you talk about depression, I think in the DSM, you need to be depressed for, or be in a depressed state with multiple symptoms for at least, I think, a minimum of 2 weeks before they classify you as major depressive disorder. The same with schizophrenia. So the current diagnosis for schizophrenia requires 2 psychotic symptoms active for a 1 month phase. So this person needs to be, having hallucinations, delusions, be in a catatonic state, having word salad for at least 1 month. And that's a long period of time if you think about specifically for psychotic symptoms. Of course, there's other psychotic symptoms that aren't related to schizophrenia, such as bipolar symptoms with psychotic episodes that can occur, and that's when you have their different classifications of psychotic symptoms and things like that. And one or more of the symptoms must be delusions, hallucinations, or disorganized speech. Um, so just keep that in mind. So if you are maybe someone you know is having symptoms of hallucinations, illusions, or disorganized speech for maybe a week, that person definitely needs to have more longevity of those symptoms to be classified as a schizophrenic. Um, let's see. Is there anything else I want to talk to you about? And of course, there's different subtypes of, or not subtypes, but different categories of schizophrenia. So schizoaffective, and then you see here 2 weeks or more psychotic symptoms must be present without mood symptoms in order to be classified as schizoaffective. Um, I think that's pretty much it. But like I said, this chapter is definitely interesting in terms of our thought process and our viewpoints on how disorders are, whether that's genetic components or their environmental components. And it talks a little bit about environmental and genetic components. So you'll have a little more research and information for your paper. But yeah, I think that's pretty much all I'm going to talk to you guys about. And twin studies are very huge in terms of schizophrenia and in general all disorders. But I think that they're very important to factor in when in terms of schizophrenia and psychotic disorders. So I think that is definitely it. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to reach out to me. I should have um, your discussion board. I mean your lecture up within the next 30 minutes, so you'll be watching that soon. If you, like I said, please email me if you have any questions. I'm here to help, and I hope you have a great week.